Hello, everyone at the Personalized Parkinson Project participant event. We're so happy to be here with you today, even virtually. We're sorry that we can't be there in person. I know that when we were at the event the last time, we truly enjoyed meeting so many of you. I'm Bill Marks. I'm a neurologist. I lead the clinical science team at Verily Life Sciences, and we're so proud at Verily to be collaborating with Radboud University and the entire team in this project. You know, these are very challenging times for all of us. And of course, the number one priority is that we look out for one another and protect ourselves and be safe during this pandemic. And yet, it's important that research continues, that we don't give up trying to better understand Parkinson's disease. So we really thank you in these challenging times for hanging in there with us. And you have our promise to continue to work to really end this disease. Our team is delighted to be with you here virtually today to give you a little bit of an update. I think many of you may know about Verily Life Sciences, but if we go on to the next slide, just a quick overview. We're an interesting organization in that we bring together life sciences, technology, and healthcare to help improve outcomes. Next slide. One of the ways we do this is we realize that there's an expanding amount of health data that is available if we can figure out a meaningful way to collect it. And that's what we're all contributing to in this personalized Parkinson project. Next slide. At Verily, we really want to work on making the health information useful, but people enjoy better lives. And in this case, we're dedicated to doing so for people with Parkinson's disease. Next slide. Over the last few years, Verily has developed a platform to bring together important health information, to collect it in new ways, such as with the study watch that you're wearing, to organize that information, all the clinical information and the MRI scans and the sensor data, to bring it together and then to activate it so that we can derive insights to understand the symptoms of this disease, why it progresses, and importantly, how we can develop better therapies for Parkinson's disease. Next slide. We work across a number of different areas, and the Personalized Parkinson Project is really a very important program here at Verily. I should mention we've also been bringing this data platform and our expertise to bear in fighting COVID around the country as well. Next slide. And so today we really thank you for contributing to research. We feel that connecting research to care is really the key, that the insights that we generate are not merely for scientific progress, but to really help all of you lead better lives and to really make the world better. And so my colleagues will tell you a little bit more about how the data we're collecting moves us in that direction. Thanks so much, and best wishes to all of you.
Thanks, Bill. So I'll take it over from here. My name is Erin Reynaldi, and I am a tech lead on our data science team. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more today about how we're using the data you're collecting on StudyWatch to develop algorithms to help us better understand Parkinson's disease progression. So if you go to the next slide, we're going to take a very early look at some of the data you've collected. We're going to look at that in terms of the facets of your sleep patterns and activity patterns. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's coming next with all the data you're helping us collect. Next slide. I just want to thank you so much for your dedication to your participation in this study. None of the analysis and results we're going to talk about in the next few slides would be possible without such excellent compliance on your part. Even 2 years into the study, average wear time per day is around 20 hours, which is amazing. You might notice that the wearing metrics look a little bit noisier on the right-hand side of the graph, and that's only because fewer participants have made it to the 2-year mark, so those wear time metrics are averaged over fewer people. But overall, the trend remains very stable around 20 hours per day. Next slide, please. I also want to thank you for your dedication and participation with the virtual motor exam, or skill check, as we call it. We launched the virtual motor exam in May, and since then, by the end of July, a total of 413 unique participants completed a total of over 5,000 virtual motor exams, and 452 unique participants contributed a total of over 4,000 medication tags, which is really astounding. So on the next slide, I want to talk a little bit more about how we're using some of the data we collected as you go about your day to understand a little bit more about Parkinson's disease progression. So first thing I want to mention is that step counting coming from a wrist-worn device like StudyWatch hasn't actually been substantially validated in free living settings. Oftentimes the studies people do to validate that the algorithm is working come from clinical settings. And so one interesting thing we brought to this space is that we had a very large study of free living data collection where people went about their daily lives and used the watch to tell us when they were walking. And this helped us to train a better step counting algorithm, which we were then able to apply to your data. So if we go to the next slide, we can actually see what this means in this cohort from the Personalized Parkinson's Project. What we notice in this slide is that we see the expected patterns of activity we would hope to see, in that it looks like we all get a later start on the weekends. That's expected. And you can see 2 peaks of step counting activity early in the morning around the time people would be getting ready to go to work. And again, a smaller peak closer to the evening around the time of day when people are finishing up at work and heading home. So now I'm going to turn it over to Max, another one of our data scientists, and he's going to dive a little bit deeper into the insights that we've uncovered in your data.
Thanks, Erin, and hi, everyone. As Erin said, my name is Max, and my work focuses on building algorithms that help advance our understanding of Parkinson's disease based on the data you've helped collect by wearing your study watches. And so one question you might be asking is why we chose to focus initially on step count. And as you know, gait impairment is one of the key symptoms of Parkinson's disease, and I'll show in the next few slides how counting steps can help us quantify that impairment. So in the next slide, what you can see is a histogram of the average daily step count for 416 participants taken from 2 cohorts. In orange on the left-hand side is the Personalized Parkinson's Project cohort, so you all and the data you've helped collect. And in blue is our baseline cohort, which is an American study where participants have not been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, but have nevertheless agreed to wear our study watch in order to help us understand what healthy looks like as far as wearing and step count in that case. And so those participants have been chosen because they have the exact same age and gender as the participants that were selected in the PPP group. And as you can see, most of the orange bars are on the left-hand side of the graph, meaning that the Parkinsonian group tends to walk about 4,400 steps per day on average. The blue bars, on the other hand, are more evenly spread, which means that some healthy participants walk significantly more, while others don't. This type of analysis helps us understand how daily activity varies within a given cohort, and also how it differs across different cohorts. In the next slide, we go one step further and try to measure whether step count can help quantify the severity of Parkinson's disease overall. In this graph, each dot represents a participant in the PPP study. And we see a significant decrease in the average daily step count as the severity of the disease increases. And it goes from about 5,000 steps per day on average for people who are early stage in the disease to fewer than half with 2,500 steps per day for the more severe people. This is really promising because it shows that daily step count has the potential to help measure the progression of Parkinson's disease and maybe even contribute to helping diagnosing it earlier. In the next slide, we see that our analysis didn't stop at step count. Thanks to the fact that almost all of you are wearing the study watch at night, we can look for trends in sleep quality and perform similar types of analyses by comparing to our healthy baseline cohort in blue. So here in the top left corner, we look at the time it takes to fall asleep. And we can see that the orange bars are on the left-hand side of the graph, which means that people who suffer from Parkinson's disease tend to fall asleep faster than their healthy counterparts. In the next slide, we can see that in addition to falling asleep faster, people with Parkinson's tend to sleep less on average than their healthy counterparts. And in the next slide, we see that they also tend to wake up more often during the night. In the next slide, we can kind of finally conclude this overview of sleep by seeing that they have higher quality sleep and spend most of their time in bed actually sleeping. Taken together, all of these analyses help us advance our scientific understanding of the different aspects of Parkinson's disease and how it translates in the home setting. So thank you all for making this possible. With that, I'll turn it over to Ritu, who will be able to give you an overview of the virtual motor exam and how it can help us go even further.
Thank you, Max. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us today. We are sad we can't be there in person, but very excited to be speaking with you nonetheless. I'm Ritu, a clinical scientist here at Verily, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the skill checks, which are sometimes referred to as the virtual motor exam in the slides. Next slide, please. Some of you have asked why we're doing this part of the study. This started in mid-May, and I wanted to share some of the thinking behind why we put the skill checks into the PPP. Today, we rely on in-clinic exams to assess a person's ability to function day to day, to measure the severity of their symptoms, and to see if the current treatment regimen is helping them or not. But as we've all seen recently, a system of care that relies on going into a clinic, going to the doctor, is vulnerable to disruption. You can see on the right here a figure charting the impact of COVID-19 on outpatient clinic visits in the early part of this year in the United States. So how are we to care for people with Parkinson's disease in the light of these types of challenges? Next slide. So instead of relying only on visits where you have to travel to your doctor, we wanted to build a tool that gives us the ability to monitor remotely. This would allow clinicians to get a read on the status of your symptoms without you having to go into the doctor's office. It would mean that we could check in on your symptoms much more often than just once every 6 months or once a year. And we would be able to understand what things look like in your day-to-day life instead of just in the exam room. So next slide, please. So we started by looking at the data from the in-clinic visits that you've all made. So this is when you go to the clinic and the assessors ask you to do the UPDRS motor exam and they push the buttons on the study watch after each task. Here on the right, you can see the digital signals we were able to extract from the study watch. So this is one example from one person during the same task while they are in an off state, and that's in the upper panel, and the same task a couple of hours after taking medication in the lower panel. You can see just by eye that there's a difference in these two states. And because we know that the intention was to be doing the same movement during these two time windows, it helps us be more certain that any differences we see in the two or any changes we see over time reflect an actual change in the symptoms, rather than perhaps the chance that someone was making a slightly different but similar movement, which is one of the main challenges we have when we're analyzing the free living data, like the data Aaron and Max were talking to you about before. Next slide, please. So the free living data give us a complete picture of how you're doing over a day, but that picture might be a little bit blurry, just a little bit lower resolution. So what we use are the skill checks, which give us a more sharp picture, a more precise picture of how you're doing at the point in time at which the skill check is done. And by doing regular skill checks while collecting the free living data, it helps us take advantage of both approaches. We were really happy to launch this option for the PPP in May. And while we are still building the algorithms to measure the disease severity, if you go to the next slide, we can share some of our preliminary observations with you. So it sounds like during that period of time when you are most active in the mornings is when the majority of you choose to do your first skill check. So 8 a.m. is the time that we found that was most common. And it looks like we have a very strong preference for doing the virtual motor exams on Sundays. So it was very interesting to see what this really looks like in people's day-to-day lives and how easy or difficult you find to actually engage with this. If you'll go to the next slide, we can share with you a couple of the results from the survey that several of you took. And we were really happy to see that in general, the experience with the skill checks has been really positive. We did hear some feedback on questions about the frequency. Do we really have to take it every week? Can we do it less often? And after we gather this first bit of data, it'll give us more insight into whether or not it makes sense to change the timing there. So we look forward to your continued feedback and to sharing the results with you as they're generated. once again, I must say, on behalf of myself and Bill and the entire team, we really want to share our heartfelt appreciation for your time and your participation. We love doing the work that we do, but we definitely could not do it without you. And we really hope to have an impact and appreciate that you're giving us the opportunity to do this. So if you go to the next slide or two, you'll see the pictures of the various members of our team. And I think we have a couple more people on the next slide. And yes, on behalf of all of us, thank you.